Hello, my friends. Connor Doobie here. Welcome into the B2B Mentors podcast. So excited to have you here. Took a little hiatus there while we're getting prepped for our next round of interviews for the coming months, and I have some heat coming at you. I have a phenomenal guest. Before we get there real quick, make sure you do a couple things because you're going to want this information. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you leave a 5-star review. And that way you and your friends can also find the show too, wherever you're at. Subscribe. We're on all your favorite top podcast platforms. You just look up B2B Mentors. Wherever you are, you can find us. All right. Also, if you are a marketer struggling to find the time, your marketing team is struggling to find the time to get more of your custom content done, from videos, articles, newsletters, you name it, go reach out to activeblogs.com. We have everything you need to outsource effectively, save you time, money, get you a better result, and get you more custom content out there. So with that, my friends, I'm going to pull up the man, the myth, the legend, my guest today, Patrick, and stick around. Please make sure you share this link, by the way, too. Drop any comments or questions as we're going along, and I'll get this guy up here. What's up, brother? Good to see you.
Hi, Connor. Nice to be with you again.
I am so, like I told you when we were kind of in the back room or whatever, every single marketer, salesperson, business owner needs to go watch your TED Talk, and we'll dive into that. I watched that this week, and I'm so freaking impressed and blown away by your expertise. I could not wait to get into this interview today. I think as a way to get started, I'm just going to let you please brag about yourself a little bit. Talk about I know no one really wants to brag about themselves, but I'm giving you permission right now to brag about yourself. And you're French. I know you can do it.
No, Connor, I cannot do that. I'm a nerd by background, and I usually start by saying I'm French. Nobody's perfect, right? But I've spent my life selling complex and expensive stuff. I was with a company called Silicon Graphics for many years, opened up their first branch in Toulouse, France. Then they promoted me to Silicon Valley. So I moved to sunny Silicon Valley, and I lived there for 28 years. I now moved to Lake Tahoe just before the COVID to enjoy life a little bit more. But I'm still passionate about a few things. One of them is sales and marketing. And another one of my passions is the human brain. So I became what's called a neuromarketing specialist, where we talk about the human brain, that's the neural part, and where we talk about marketing as in I'm going to try to sell you something you don't even need. So that's it. I've written a couple of books. I've been around the globe. I think the last time I checked, I have close to 3.5 million miles on various airlines.
Oh my God.
I've trained 200,000 people, including over 20,000 CEOs. Gotten a number of awards. The one that I'm the proudest of is the American Marketing Association gave me the next big thing in marketing award in 2009. And I'm particularly proud of that one. It's because that's the same award that was won by YouTube in 2007. And that's it. I became rich several times in my life. I was multimillionaire, doing really well, but I was never smart enough to sell my stock at the right time. So that's why I still have to work a little bit today. But I did many startups. I did, Silicon Graphics was a startup when I joined them. Then I did another startup with John Scully called Live Picture. Then I worked in a number of startups. But I was one of the execs at a company called LinuxScare just before we were going to go public. We went public. No, we didn't go public because we had filed the S1, and it was in 2001 when the market crashed. So I put all my stock options in the trash, and I started writing. I wrote 2 books. My first book is called Neuromarketing, and my second book is called The Persuasion Code. So that my expertise, as per se right now, is human persuasion and how that applies to sales and marketing, but with a twist, which is that I'm not a guru, I'm a scientist. So I will never tell people, trust me. I always want to support what I say by using science, and the science that we talk about is the science of the human brain.
And you've been to the top, you've been to hell and back, and you're still such a humble guy and just such a kind, genuine person and willing to share your time with us. So I really appreciate that. What is it in your life, like what of all the different areas you could touch when it comes to neuroscience, why sales and marketing? Like what interests you and keeps you passionate about the world of sales and marketing in particular?
Well, think about it, right? Everybody will tell you sales and marketing are as much an art as they are a science. Right? In fact, there are over 20,000 books that have been written on sales and marketing, and all these books give you a long list of what you should do and an equally long list of what you shouldn't do. But none of them is trying to remove the artistic part of it, because I'm a scientist, so I'm disciplined enough to apply a step-by-step process anchored in science. But I'm not the creative guy that is completely mad and that will always come up with the best idea of creating a marketing campaign or a new sales message that's going to work. So that's been my number one priority in life, if you want. It's to remove the artistic part of sales and marketing. And amazingly enough, I found the answers not in sales and marketing book, but I found the answers in neuroscience book. In other words, today there are two worlds that do not talk to each other. You have the world of neuro. These are people that have a PhD or a doctorate, on a specific subject about the human brain, and they understand quite well how the brain works. On the other side of the fence, you have the world of sales and marketing, and these people, they somewhat know how to sales and market, but they came up with a lot of empirical rules of what works and what does not work in sales and marketing. And those worlds have never spoken to each other. So 20 years ago, when I wanted to write a book, and pretty much everybody wants to write a book, right? But when I wanted to write a book, my expertise being sales and marketing, I looked at what's the competition, right? And I found 20,000 books on sales and marketing, but I found that none of them were talking about the human brain, and that's the ultimate target when you do sales and marketing, right? Because it's never the one who has the best product that wins. It's always the one who has the best message about his product that wins. And so how do you use a step-by-step process to create killer messages that will resonate in the brain of your targets, your consumers, right?
And you could coin yourself an expert in sales or marketing, but 90%, 99% of what you see out there is gut instinct, going by the hip, or maybe data, but data that may not be able to be replicated because it's not being done in a scientific manner.
Well, no, data is always useful when you do sales and marketing, but it's useful. The sad thing, though, is the only way you can use data in that case is you create two messages, you test them, and then you use data to decide which of those two messages are going to be the best, right? But without doing this, can you use a predictable model that will tell you whether that strategy or that message will work better? And I am a strong believer that it's possible. And my work is based on the work of a researcher by the name of Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman was a professor of psychology at Princeton University, and he won the Nobel Prize in Economy in 2002. And the puzzling discovery that Kahneman made was that when we decide, or the source of all human behavior is not what we think. In other words, Kahneman discovered that there is not one brain in the human skull. It's that we have two brains. He named them System 1 and System 2. And again, his work got him the Nobel Prize. So he's a very sharp guy, right? And he's talking about those two systems in the brain. He's talking about the outside, the wrinkly pinky part of the brain. He named that System 2. I didn't like those names, so I called it the rational brain. And then he named the other brain, which is the top of the stem, the section that unites both hemispheres, this section here, which is called the cerebellum, and this section here, which is called the middle brain. All together, he named that System 1, and I called it the Primal Brain. And here is what Kahneman did, and he demonstrated it. So it's a scientific demonstration.
Don't drop the brain, bro. Don't drop the brain.
Mind, right? But he demonstrated that the key to understanding human behavior is to understand the primal brain. In other words, he said, although we think we have evolved and that we are smart, in reality, everything is about the primal brain. He said the primal brain always wins, right? Or System 1 always wins. So what I did, and I started this over 20 years ago, I started to study that brain, the primal brain, which it's easy to also associate it with the unconscious brain or the subconscious brain. So I started to study that brain, and I realized that that brain follows a number of rules because it's an ancient brain. It's a brain that's about 100 times older than the neocortex. So the neocortex here started to grow in Homo sapiens about 5 million years ago. However, our primal brain is about 500 million years ago. You have to remember that we share that brain. We have that brain in common with reptiles, for example, right? But if you think about it, reptiles make a lot of decisions every day. The decisions they make is, am I going to crawl here? Am I going to crawl there? Am I going to eat this? Am I going to eat that? Am I going to nap now? Or am I going to nap later? Well, guess what? That reptilian brain is the same portion of our brain, and we still use that. That brain still has more influence on our final decision than all the logics in the world, okay? So I started to study that primal brain 20 years ago, and again, I've been teaching people now how to communicate and how to better understand the primal brain of their audience, right? So it goes both ways. You need to understand the primal brain of your audience, then you need to be able to talk to the primal brain of your audience, so that when you create a message, that message resonates with that brain without insulting our more rational neocortex.
How, do you, this might be a little obscure, but do you ever see through evolution, the way we're rapidly, with technology and everything, is our rational brain going to take over from our primal brain at some point sooner? Maybe not. I mean, maybe it's millions of years, or maybe it's soon. Like, have you had that exercise before or thought about that?
It's moving at the speed of evolution, right? So I just want to give you an idea. Everybody who's been in sales and marketing know that words are not very effective to influence people compared to images, right? So why is that? Why is it that an image will impact people a lot more than text? So as I said earlier on, the primal brain is about 500 million years old. Now, do you know how old are words? Any idea?
Tens of thousands?
Right. So 10,000 years for written words, right? Spoken words, it's a lot harder because the experts do not agree, but spoken words are about 50,000 years old, so 5 times older. Well, think about it. We've been using words to communicate, written words, for 10,000 years. If you divide that by 20 years for an average generation, right, it's only 500 generations. So the reason why words are not very effective when you try to influence people is they've been around for only a flicker of time. 500 generations is not that much. So you have to remember that evolution doesn't work very, very fast. So your question is kind of tricky because, yes, we know the internet is changing everything very rapidly, but all these changes haven't made much impact on our primal brains yet. We're only about 1 generation into the internet. So sadly enough, by the way, everybody's wondering what's going to happen with that. In other words, yes, we realize that these technological changes are making a big impact on our brain, but we really have no ways of predicting it. In other words, the pace of change and everything else that goes on, it's everybody's bet.
And there's such an interesting play on this in the marketing world, because as marketers, we put so much emphasis on the written word, copywriting, copy editing, but maybe even especially as B2B marketers, pages and pages of white papers and documents with very limited graphics or visuals in it. We're kind of doing things wrong, aren't we?
Yes, but you know why? It's because that's an interesting topic. Most people, when they communicate, they want to communicate about who they are and what they do. So we tend to speak about our product and services. Now, we all know, if we've been in marketing for long enough, that talking about what we do and who we are has zero impact. So then we say, well, if we're really smart, we're going to talk about what our product can do on the world of our prospect, right? So we defocus the message from being about us to being about the impact of our product on the world of our customers. So that's what we talk about. But that's wrong. What we should do is we should show the impact of our product and services on the world of our prospect. In other words, the images that we need to present are not the images of our product. So we need to find a metaphorical visual representation of how our product impacts the world of our prospect. And let me give you a very simple example, right? Now imagine if you sell a service to lose weight. Imagine you're like Weight Watchers, right? Of course, you don't want to give people a long list of the menus that you're going to have for them, the workout exercises that they should be doing, etc. What you do is you show a guy who is 200 pounds, and then the same guy after he's lost at 50 pounds. And that's an impact on my brain instantly. Right? So that talks to my primal brain. I can see visually the result of the impact of your services on my world, which in this case is me. Right? Same thing when you see a guy who's bald, and then you see the same guy with a full head of hair. So it's very easy to understand that when you sell a product like, some kind of liquid to regrow hair or a program to lose weight. But when you sell a very complicated software application or some kind of intangible service, showing visually the impact of your services on the world of your prospect becomes very difficult. So the reason why, all this to answer your question, the reason why we tend to use words to do that, because it's easier for us to do it with word than it would be with visual. So we take the shortcut and we use word. The problem is it has very little impact on our customers.
It is hard because I was going through these practices as I was going through your course, and I'm looking at my site and I'm looking at some of our stuff. I'm like, how could I visually represent this? And one thing that I was questioning, so in your course, you mentioned like the projector example. I can't remember what the name of the company was, but they had like a projector and a laptop, and it's like quick. And the way the messaging was in what you had talked about in the stimuli of the brain, it's one of those that's more of a pattern disruptors versus like I get it easy. Like there's a fat man and there's a skinny man. It doesn't make your brain have to think very much. What do you think the preferred stimuli for like visual representation could possibly, like, is it more pattern disruption? That's what marketers should be aiming towards, or more like super easy, simple, I get it. Like even the cup example, right? With the nose in the plastic surgery example, it took me a little bit for it to click until it mentioned, but it is definitely like a pattern disruption.
So it depends what you're trying to communicate. So maybe you're trying to communicate your unique selling proposition, right? So if you're trying to communicate a USP, ideally what you would want to do is you would want to show that all your competitors are a red apple and that you are the only green apple. So if there is a way to show that in one single visual, then you should try it. Now, if it's not so much your unique selling proposition that you're trying to communicate, in the case of Weight Watchers, if they put a picture of a guy who is 200 pounds and a guy who is 50 pounds, maybe the other programs that compete with them give the same result. But it doesn't matter, because if when they do this, they are still capable of expressing their value prop without using any word. The only word that they need is Weight Watchers, and that's it, just the brand. Right? So it depends what you need to communicate. So it gets more complicated depending on where you are in your sales and marketing objectives.
So on a case-by-case basis, where do you think we're in a digital world now? I mean, you're working on a course called Zoom Sucks, right? Basically is like selling remotely, and so many people have had to learn how to do it. I've been doing it for years, so I picked up keys on how to do it effectively. How do we make sure we're hitting and being effective in digital marketing and complementing the 6 stimuli that you talk about?
That's $1 million question, right? But just to backtrack a little bit about what you said, yes, I got a call from LinkedIn a few months ago, and they asked me to develop a second course. My first course from LinkedIn is called The Neuroscience of Sales, and anybody with a LinkedIn account can access it. But the second one is going to be called Why We Hate Zoom and How Neuroscience Can Help. Because here's what happened, right? In March 2020, everybody switched from trying to sell face-to-face to selling on Zoom. But the medium is fundamentally different. And because, again, we're going to judge people not with our rational brain, but with our primal brain, the primal brain being this ancient organ, we have to adapt our content, we have to adapt the way we communicate to that very specific medium, which is called Zoom. So I'll give you a very simple example. That anybody who has used PowerPoint to present, they know that when you present on PowerPoint, it's better to stand than to be seated in the same room as people, right? Most of the time. And if you're standing, you don't want to present with your two hands in your pocket. We would all agree that this is a sin on PowerPoint, right? But do you know what is the equivalent sin on Zoom? And most people don't know it. You need to have your hands visible. In other words, hiding your hands on Zoom is the equivalent of presenting on PowerPoint with your hands in your pocket. Why? Because your subconscious primal brain goes, yeah, I can see that guy, but I don't see his hands. So maybe he's hiding a weapon that's going to be capable of killing me through the internet, right? Because our primal brain is really primal. So the reason why people need to see your hands, they need to see your palm, because it's a sign that you're coming at peace, that you're not carrying a weapon. And the problem is most people don't know this. So that's
and it's hard to maintain sometimes too. Like even after we talked the other day, I even realized there's a couple times where my hand dips behind the camera or even just my thumbs. Is it like you need your whole hands or just like your hands visible to?
The most important part is people need to see your palms, okay? And you don't need to have them in the frame of the camera all the time, but at least from time to time. And it's completely unconscious. And then it goes on and on about the thing that we do on Zoom. Now, I'll give you an example. Right now, I am looking at you right in the eyes, but you don't see it because there is an angular difference between my camera. My camera is right there, and you are right here. So there is an angular difference. And for most people, if I'm talking to you on Zoom right now, your primal brain goes, he's not even talking to me. He's not paying any attention. Why should I pay attention to him when the guy cannot even hold eye contact? You know how uncomfortable it is to meet people that don't have proper eye contact, especially people who are almost like sick with it, right? If you meet somebody with autism, for example, it's a threat for them to look at you in the eyes, so they feel very uncomfortable. And we experience a little bit of that through Zoom, but we are not even conscious about it. And again, I just give you two rules, but there is like so much more, right?
Yeah, there's a lot to consider and a lot of training, but I think having consciousness to it could make or break a big difference in even just that one extra deal or that one extra conversation, that one extra partner can make or break a big difference. Because I've seen CEOs of billion-dollar companies I've been on camera with, and it's like, what the heck are you doing? Like they're like, it's just all awkward, and they have no consciousness as to like how it's actually coming across on the other end.
Correct.
So, I'm excited for that course.
There is a very famous research by a guy by the name of Albert Mehrabian. Mehrabian was a professor of psychology at UCLA, and he made research which a lot of people have heard about it, which is about the relative impact of words versus tone of voice versus body language. So this is known as the 7-38-55 rule. So Mehrabian said that 7% of our impact comes from the words that we use, 38% from our tone of voice, and 55% from our body language. Now, his research is very often misunderstood and those numbers are being misused, but it's still a very interesting indication. And the indication is that the primal brain of your audience is also what's called the preverbal brain. It's a brain that doesn't understand words. Why? Because it's 500 million years old, and words are only 10,000 years old for written words and 50,000 for spoken words, right? So that explains, for example, why visuals have so much importance, because it's 55% of what you're going to be communicating at the end. Now, sadly enough, if you're on Zoom, now people are going to be paying a little bit of attention to your slide. So, of course, then that goes back to what's the quality of your slide? Now, as we all know, because I've seen, I don't know, maybe 3,000 PowerPoint presentations, maybe 5,000. I don't know the exact number. I've seen many of them, right? And most of them suck. Why? Because people have too much text. They have too many bullets, and they don't communicate properly, and there is no storytelling in the series of slides that they bring. Well, guess what? The primal brain loves stories, because stories create a multi-sensory environment, which makes the story believable, but very few people use good stories, and even less people know how to tell stories. And so when you're on Zoom, all this issue of, is your message very visual? Are you visually attractive, even if you look like a 60-year-old guy like me, right? So that's the point. And there are a few things that you can do without using cosmetic surgery.
The texting, I'm a huge offender of. I'm thinking back to even like conferences that I've spoken at. And I'm like, oh my God, I use so much text on those slides just trying to get my damn message across. And it just went in and out. That brings another important point about the whole Zoom and virtual world we're in. Conferences, almost every single marketer that I've spoken with over the last 6 months has plans for an online webinar or online event. And one thing that really caught my attention in your coursework is people realistically, they check in at the beginning and then the rest is just molds in their brain, and then they check back in at the end. All the meat in the middle. So how do you be effective knowing that the primal brain is really only checking in at the beginning of something and at the end of it?
Well, you need to articulate your message so that you put the good stuff at the beginning and at the end. In fact, George Lucas said, the secret to a good movie is create a hot opening, create a hot close, and just don't screw up in the middle. So knowing that whatever you communicate, we cannot, beat that particular law. It's actually in psychology called the primacy recency effect, right? Our brains are wired to remember things at the beginning and at the end, and our attention will drop always in the middle. So you have to take that into account. You need to put something really juicy at the beginning and at the end. So you have to articulate your message like this. But the main problem that I see is what you just said, which is people only know how to communicate by using words. And they have very low persuasive effectiveness. So, but of course, then the difficulty becomes, okay, but how am I going to explain that concept with a visual? And I'll give you an example, but this is the cover of my book, right? And on the back of the cover of my book, I have a poster. So my old model of persuasion fits on one page, and it's a complete visual. Now, I have 30 years of sales and marketing experience on one page, and it took me 20 years to come up with that particular visual. And there is a distillation column, and there is an analogy with that distillation column here. But I would have to explain to you why I use this analogy with the distillation column. Right? Because in the end, we're looking to find just a few drops in that step 4 of the process here. We're looking to find just a few drops of concentrated message, because most messages are too long. People believe also that text is important, right? And that quantity is important. Like, this is the number 2 sin of people when they communicate, right? They're going to tell you too much. No, tell me the same story in 3 seconds as opposed to 3 hours if you want to get my attention, right? And a famous American president said, if you want me to present for 3 hours, I'm ready right now. If you want me to present for an hour, give me 3 days to prepare. And if you want me to present for 5 minutes, give me 3 weeks to prepare, right? It is always much, much harder to make your message in a very short amount of time.
So difficult. So many questions come to mind with that. But in the short time that we do have, are there any other recommendations that are key? Actually, you know what? Screw the recommendations, because they can find that kind of stuff in your coursework. What are some of the other biggest mistakes that you're finding marketers and salespeople are making that is not speaking enough to the primal brain of their customers?
Well, I think the number one sin is people are talking to their customer about them, not about the impact of their product on the world of those people. So that's number one. Number 2 is they use too many words, right? Not enough real visuals. Number 3, the message is too long, right? It's inevitable. Number 4, the message is not differentiated. In other words, most companies' websites start with those keywords, right? We are the leading provider of. Well, guess what your competitors are saying? Your competitors are saying, we are the leading provider of. So in the brain of the buyer, they do not see enough contrast between all the offerings, because people use the same words, and all those words are intangible, and by definition, those words cannot be understood by a brain which is 500 million years old. It violates all the communication rules of that very ancient brain. So it becomes the issue of how can you say we are the only provider of, even if you're selling a commodity. In other words, you need to create the perception of uniqueness, even if you don't really have it. You have to differentiate at all costs.
So how would you change that from we are the only provider of to in real time, how would you shift that message?
Ideally, you need to say, we are the only or the first or the best provider of, and you need to finish that. And behind that, you put your unique selling proposition. Now, again, it took me 20 years to come up with a process which takes 2 days with all the executives of the company, including the CEO, the CMO, the CSO, etc. And I hammer them on the head on this concept so that they finally agree as to what makes them unique. And very often, the uniqueness is not in the product itself. I'll give you a very simple example, right? Domino's manufactures home delivered pizza, and they have 100 competitors. So there is no way Domino's could find the uniqueness in the product itself. And guess where they found the uniqueness? They found the uniqueness in the delivery. And that's why, for the longest period of time, they used 30 minutes or less, or it's free. So if you ask all the executives at Domino, they know they are not in the pizza business. They are a FedEx organization which happen to sell pizza. In other words, the pizza only becomes an accessory to the business. So it's a strategic work that needs to be done by the company at the highest level with all the executives, where they recognize that the product is not unique, but selling a product that is not unique is not valuable in the long term, because the only thing that's going to make them unique is the price. So then you fight on price and then somebody's going to die, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to find something unique in what you do. If you're selling a commodity, you have to look outside. So it could be in the delivery. I'll give you another example. Levi's, right? They make jeans. Now there are 200 different brands of jeans, but Levi's found a uniqueness. They are the original. And if you look at all their communication today, they are not selling you a jean. They are selling you the original jean, because all the other ones are just going to be copycats. And it goes on and on, right?
Yeah, I'm curious how that one connects. The Domino's makes sense because what they realize is the fear is their customers' fear is I won't get my pizza in time because I'm starving and I want a pizza quick, which is why I ordered it. Is that fear? Should marketers in their messaging, like, is fear the strongest feature to be speaking to and calling out?
Right. So if you look at, we talk about the iceberg of decision drivers. So in the iceberg of what drives the decision of people, at the very top of the iceberg is the likes, then the wants, then the need, then the pain, and then the fears. So people that are expert in the brain, they will tell us that all the decisions we make, whatever the product is, whatever the decision is always based on fear. Now, it is so deep inside our unconscious, or what we're going to call our primal brain, that most people don't realize. Right? So selling to the fear is always good, but people don't understand that there is a big difference between the conscious fears and the unconscious fear of survival. Because at the end of the day, it's all about survival. Our primal brain only worries about one thing. It's keeping us alive. And to do that, it wants to avoid pain. And, an extreme pain typically leads to death, which is no survival, okay?
Which if I don't get my pizza, I'm going to die. It's
If you
guaranteed.
don't get your pizza, the pain of the pizza is actually the anxiety of not knowing when the pizza will arrive. So it's not quite a fear, but it's not very far, right? But if Domino's was going to price their pizza at $100 a pie, they wouldn't sell many of them, because your fear is, well, if I pay them $100, I'm not going to have enough money to pay my rent, therefore I cannot survive. Right? So that's the idea. But in the case of Levi's, the pain is more subtle. And it's, well, I need a pair of jeans, and I can get it from 100 different vendors. But there is some value of buying the original, because if it's the original, maybe I'm going to buy the idea that I'm going to become one of those gold miners during the gold rush. And they were all, fighting to get Levi's jeans, because at the time, they were the longest lasting pair of pants you could get, right? So originally, Levi's value prop was, if you buy one of our jeans, you can go mining for 6 months with the same pair of trousers. But now today, nobody cares, because we can all afford to get 10 pairs of jeans. So the longevity of the jean is not bad. But unconsciously, we might still be buying, and I didn't do the study, so I can't tell you for sure. But the pain that we have is that, well, if I buy just a regular jean, I'm not the original miner. So that might be what they're selling to at that point.
Dude, there's so much still I want to break down, but I know we're tight on time. So I do want to ask you this for those who are listening to this. Now, by the way, if you guys are enjoying this, please share it. Share this out if you're watching this live. Comment on it. Share it with your friends. They need this information. What are some, besides your resources, of course, are there any other materials for the layman that you would recommend to go study, read, look up?
Sure. So again, our model is based on the research work of Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a very famous book that everybody has.
Say his last name again.
Kahneman, Kahneman. First name is Daniel, and his book is titled Thinking Fast and Slow. He's written several books, but the book that made him really famous is Thinking Fast and Slow. He talks about those two brains, system 1, system 2. System 1 is the fast brain. It's the brain of reflex. It's the unconscious. System 2 is the neocortex that makes us smart. So he wrote that book, but I want to give you a little bit of warning because a lot of people have bought that book, and I know only about 20% of the people who bought the book actually read it because it's PhD plus level reading. So it's a fascinating book from a scientific perspective, but it's not an easy read. But that's the scientific foundation of our model. Then there are a number of other books which I consider to be my favorite books. I mean, one of them is by another researcher by the name of Robert Cialdini. Cialdini wrote The Psychology of Influence. It's a great book. He's on his 9th or 10th edition. He talks about 6 laws of influence. Now, it's a great book, but it's not a step-by-step process. So his 6 laws of influence are embedded in my model, but my model is a step-by-step. But he is also one of the researchers who inspired me to write my book. And then there is another book by Dan Ariely called Predictably Irrational. Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. Ariely is a professor of psychology somewhere in Chicago. All right, so these are some of my 3 favorite books.
Love it. Anything else that's high impact that you want to share or touch on before we wrap up here?
Well, as you said, I think my 17-minute TED Talk is a good way to get started with the whole thing. Now, I did it 7 or 8 years ago, so today I would do it slightly differently. But and if anybody is an expert in parenting, in education, in justice, in dating, right? Because understanding the primal brain is key to finding the right partners in life. In other words, I believe that if people knew better about their own primal brain, we wouldn't have a divorce rate of 50%. So if anybody is an expert in all this field, I have applied again this model to sales and marketing, but I would be happy to work with people in other areas of life.
Have you ever read Attached?
Sure.
That one was pretty interesting. For me, pivot in the relationship category. It's curious how the two apply. It didn't bridge it very well in that book, but I wonder if there's a book that does bridge that a bit better.
Again, my interest is a little bit different. For another one of my favorite books is called The Evolution of Consciousness. So it's written by an expert on evolutionary biology. And my favorite book of all times has actually nothing to do with sales and marketing, but I wanna mention it because I just reread it. It's called The God Delusion. So if you're interested in better understanding God, and it's by a guy called Richard Dawkins. His other very famous book is called The Selfish Gene, where he demonstrates that we are selfish and that selfishness is at the core of every form of life.
I think it's
completely compatible with our primal brain.
You touched on such a great point there. Is we have to open our horizons of this isn't a marketing book, but oh my God, I can learn so much about marketing from studying this stuff, from reading the God, what was it? The God
Delusion.
The God Delusion. I can't even read my own handwriting. Patrick, this has been phenomenal, bro. We'll have to do this again. I'm excited for having you on. And what's the best way for people to find you, get into contact with you?
So our website is salesbrain.com. I have a LinkedIn profile. So people type my name, Patrick Ramboise, on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty good at responding, individually to every message that I get on LinkedIn. I have, a number of followers now. And again, if you have 17 minutes, my TED Talk is a good introduction. If you have 48 minutes, the LinkedIn course, which is available right now, is also a good resource. And in 6 months from now, we should have the second LinkedIn course titled "Why We Hate Zoom and How Neuroscience Can Help."
I love it. And it's so funny that they can get away with that on their coursework too. Why We Hate Zoom.
No, wait. This is the working title. I already know that that's not going to be the final
No,
title.
you got to stick with that title, bro. You got to stick with that title.
No, I'm fighting with the producer, but I know I'm going to lose. So it's going to go "Why We Hate Video Conferencing" or something like that.
They're like, we might have a lawsuit on our hands. We might have to iterate that a bit. But personally, I think the title's kick-ass. But I appreciate it so much, brother. Stick around for one quick second here while we wrap up. All of you guys, wow, that was like blow your mind. There is so much more. I can endorse the crap out of his materials. Go check out his TED Talk. You got people who are like, hey, go check out this video to learn more about me. And you're like, that was kind of lame. Patrick's TED Talk will totally blow your mind. His course is phenomenal. Go make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn. Check out his site. Share this. Go subscribe when you get a chance on all your favorite apps so you do not miss out on new episodes, updates, and past episodes. With that, my friends, make it great. I'll see you on the other side.